welcome to the Building and Growing podcast. We're delighted to have Rod Schneider from Workforce with us. How are you, Rod?
I'm very well, Lucas. It's great to be here on this cold London evening.
Indeed, indeed. Look, I mean, we should have done this in Brisbane with a beer.
Look, that would have been wonderful, but even London with a beer would have been nice. But
Yeah.
we'll settle for beggars can't be choosers, mate.
That's it. Yeah. Well, look, Rod, thank you so much for joining us. You are the COO of Workforce, but I think it's always best to hear an introduction from the guests themselves. So, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can introduce myself, or I can introduce my role in the company. I mean, I'm my current role, as you said, COO of Workforce, which is a workforce management company that originated back in Brisbane.
Yep.
Hence, you mentioned Brisbane, and it was founded at essentially out of the QUT Student Guild Bar in Brisbane, and is growing now. I work in the London office. There's an office in Chicago, one in Zagreb, one in Manila.
Wow.
So a nice startup story out of Brisbane in Queensland, Australia.
What is Workforce's purpose?
So our purpose is to reduce friction for shift and hourly workers. And so when we're talking about the problems we solve, the paperwork, the manager who's trying to call someone in, all of these things that the employers are doing, that's all creating this build-up of anxiety in the employer's mind. But we also see that from the employee side too. When they're not getting paid right, when they're not sure about why they were paid this way, when they can't get their rota on time. Just some of those really simple things like staff getting rotas in a timely manner or knowing why they paid is so important. And we see our purpose that is, if we can eliminate as much of that friction as possible, we will make the journey smoother. First of all, the workplace is going to be a more enjoyable place for these businesses, right? Because they don't have people questioning how much they were paid, or worried that they've got to get through all these timesheet approvals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it means those businesses are also going to be more efficient businesses too, and they can focus more on the problems that they're trying to solve, right? Mm-hmm. So we're trying to solve the problem of workforce management for them. They're trying to solve, how can I sell the most pints as possible, or how can we ensure that the patients in this care home are adequately cared for, and we can do that and have the highest standards of care or hospitality service, whatever it is. They're trying to solve their problems. The last thing they want is to be stuck answering a question about someone who's wondering why they got paid 500 instead of 510 last week, or for some manager to be stressing about getting the rotas out. So that's our purpose, reducing that friction and just making life for those frontline workers a better place to be.
Yeah, fantastic. And what about you? What was your journey before Workforce?
Yeah, so I'm, recovering from a career in finance. So, I've got to be careful here, because you're finance dear to your heart.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, I'm always happy to have a crack at it. So.
Yeah, there's plenty about it to have a crack at too.
Yes.
So that's fine. So I went to uni in Toowoomba back in Queensland. Ended up in financial planning after graduating from commerce.
Yes.
Did that for 10 years, and the little business, which in Australia is known as Tanda, but the rest of the world known as workforce.com, that little business was just starting to get going, and I knew the founders there, and it was a good chance to get out of financial planning. And I'm not sure how many of your listeners will be aware, but the target on financial planners back in Australia is large.
Yes.
And every time a financial planner does something which may be illegal anyway, for example, one of them got caught forging documents.
Shivers.
That's already illegal. They don't need new laws.
Yes.
But the Australians get so upset about it, they introduce another raft of laws. So all of my friends from financial planning are recovering from the fact that they have to issue documents this thick with so many disclaimers just to give simple advice now. And that was getting to me. That was getting to me at the time as well. The fact that trying to give simple, practical financial advice was pretty difficult, required a lot of paperwork. It was just harder than it needed to be. And so, observing my friends making a crack of this business, and I thought to myself, well, technology's, not going anywhere, and jumped on board. They had an idea for an onboarding product that actually, leveraged my financial services license, so mutually beneficial in that regard, and haven't looked back from that.
Yeah, fantastic. That's awesome. And look, I mean, you mentioned the fact that the company was kind of born out of, in the student guild or in the student guild bar. I guess, are you able to talk about some of those first initial use cases that, the team came up with back in the day? Yeah,
absolutely. So the founders were all at QUT, varying years of uni, but I'm very frustrated with their student guild or student union because basically seeing their student fees go and not get any services for them, and so they decided to run for the student union, which I think one of the problems was it hadn't been contested for many years, and if you don't have to if you're not accountable, if you don't have to run a contest, then you get lazier and lazier over time, I think. So
Indeed.
The guys went and they won the election. They're like, right, so we're here. What do we do? Most obvious thing is the food and drink services that you take control of on campus, right?
Yeah.
And they got an audit done of the student bar, which was losing an incredible amount of money at the time. And it turns out that, one of the things they found out going back is that there were timesheets being submitted for times when people weren't working.
Oh, no.
Basically.
Yeah.
So there was a big time theft issue there that they had to address. And at the time, there weren't any, like our system now, cloud-based clock-in devices. And, there's lots of providers out there with them. But no, it had to be these big, chunky pieces of kit that cost thousands and thousands of dollars.
Oh, no.
And, that was the only way in. And the guys were like, well, the guild's already losing money, so we're not going to buy one of them. And Alex wrote a version of basically of something that take your photo and go into Google Sheets.
Okay, yeah, nice.
And that was version 1 of Workforce.
Yeah.
Is essentially just doing that so that they could make sure that they were paying people for the time they actually worked.
Fantastic.
And it was funny because at the time there were a couple of other local businesses around Brisbane, one down the ports, another pizza shop that got word of it. I think one of them had a son that was also in the guild and he was running a business, so he must have told his dad and someone else. So a couple of other local businesses in Brisbane heard about this and going, oh shit, we've got that problem too. Like we're still, people are doing lots of paper timesheets at this place. They're not quite sure of when, or they may be using one of the old punch cards.
Yes.
We've replaced a lot of them over our time in business. So it started from that end, which is interesting because now one of our greatest features is actually ensuring that people are paid correctly the other way. So it might have started from the employer side, but it's a big benefit on the employee side because, again, labour laws are complex, very complex in France, very complex in Australia, and you need something that can interpret those rules and ensure people are paid overtime when they're due overtime and stuff like that. So it doesn't matter whether you're employer side or employee side of that problem, just making sure that it's clear and accountable and people are getting paid correctly is so much of the issue. We find some people will even come back and say requests to HR have gone down after they've implemented our system.
Yes, nice.
Because people just weren't sure about what they're meant to be paid. Like there's nothing malicious, or they might have been paying correct, but if you don't have that transparency over what you're meant to be paid in the hourly workforce, then you're right to ask question. you want
Indeed.
it.
Yeah, no. And look, I guess, going back to the beginning, the fact that they solved their own problem is always a very sort of, positive sign for a company when the founders have experienced the problem before rather than just hypothesized about it. I think it does translate to some really good traction, which has been the case for Workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be the case, as you say, for many products, right? You've got to solve a problem, and what better way than being in business? Essentially, it wasn't commercial business, but it was still the students' money that they were,
Indeed.
custodians of.
Yeah.
There. So what better way than solving that problem for the students and getting them better value for money?
Yeah, that's right. And onto the another point you mentioned about penalty rates and that being calculated. I remember working at the airport, when I was at uni, and there were all kinds of different penalties that got incurred after a certain amount of time and whatnot. It was super confusing for the employees.
Yeah,
because as much as you might know that there are penalties due, unless you've read a whole book of legislation, you had no transparency of what they should be.
Yeah. And one of the things that's interesting about that, I think I mentioned France because in this area that's probably the most complex to deal with, right? But the same goes in Australia. If someone works more than this many hours in a week, there's a penalty. This many hours in a day, there's a penalty. The days stack into the hours. So if this, then that, and then if they haven't had a break, if there's this much time between the shifts, and I think sometimes it can be hard for people to get the complexity that stacks up into all that.
For sure.
And then there's the funny ones that we can't solve for. Like there's some ones in Australia. Like I know that at some of the awards, temperature's one.
Okay. Yes.
Which if you do have a device that can track the temperature and plug in, then it is possible to solve. But it's a bit of a niche case.
Yeah, difficult.
But I think there's even some really weird conditions in some awards about other weather conditions and other that you just could never quite automate. But that's how complicated that problem is. So and lots of people are experiencing it, like you in the airport.
Yes, yeah.
But you think about all of the frontline workers that in this industry, it's care.
Yeah.
All of these people have various conditions. They might be sleeping overnight somewhere. There might be other penalties for looking after or doing certain tasks. All of this has to be calculated.
Indeed. And you mentioned a couple of industries so far, hospitality and care. We've discussed aviation briefly.
Yeah.
Well, what would you say the main industries that you serve are?
Yeah, it depends a little bit region by region. In the UK here, care, hospitality, retail, big markets for us, some manufacturing, some delivery. The way I tell people to think about it is that if the hours they work determine what their end pay is going to be, it's it's definitely going to be a good fit, right? Because people need to know what hours to pay off and any other conditions around that, which covers a lot of people, even people on part-time and full-time contracts. Might have varying pay based on the work they do or additional clauses. So that's the main thing we're trying to solve for. And I would, it feels like to us anyway, the two biggest markets in this country are hospitality and care.
Yes.
And those are pretty universal. And some of those other ones I mentioned, manufacturing, retail, if they're working hourly.
Then it's involved. Yeah, fantastic. So look, I'm going to dive, do a little bit of a deep dive here because I was playing around on your website and I saw, hospitality and hotels in particular featured on there. And, it sort of explained a pain point where, you might have a sudden surge of demand of bookings and then you need to sort of, backfill with staff. So I'm wondering whether you can talk us through a couple of sort of those solutions that you've got built in.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one to mind just then as you're saying, you might need more staff, is obviously the ability to send out shifts to employees on their phone in those areas and send out vacant shifts. And we still encounter lots of businesses that are doing that by phone call or call around rather than push notifications, or people are hesitant to use it because they're worried about the tech literacy of their staff, or they're worried about someone who's not qualified that might pick up a shift. Well, all of those things can be catered for. You can set boundaries around all of these things, and the clients that use that well find it really important. And the other thing that's important about that is you get a lot of people talking about how hard it is to find frontline workers, particularly in industries like hospitality, like social care. If they're rewarded for additional shifts, if they get overtime for working additional shifts, and there is an easy way for them to pick up shifts, actually, the data actually shows that they're more likely to stay at those employers, and they're more likely to gravitate towards those employers. Like, people are more likely to say, well, I'm only rostered 30 hours, but I can always pick up a new shift really easily if I can. So the simple ability to be able to put out shifts and have shifts allocated like that is really important. And the other, that's the as it happens, but the other important part is before the shift even happens, right? And getting that demand right. And there's lots of ways now. The obvious one is by sales patterns, but you can also look at all sorts of data, historical patterns of the rotas, where you can even go into where managers are changing their rotas consistently.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And look at, well, if they're making this change every time, do we want to just make that the change permanently?
Yeah.
You can cater by lead-in time to shifts, all sorts of stuff like that. Lots of people are doing weather, which always makes me laugh because I never get a weather prediction that's right anytime I look, but it is working for some people, and the broad changes in the weather do work. So there's lots of things that can feed into that, and the more technology literate, or basically the more resources the client has, the more inputs they put into getting their staffing their staffing patterns right. Yep. And we've seen quite a bit of success in that technology continues to improve and continues to get more and more accurate. I think people are right to be skeptical of it, because it's things will always happen that are unexpected, but it's much better to have it there and to be close.
Indeed, yeah, and to be able to respond in a more efficient manner. I mean, if we talk about the benefits of workforce so far, and I guess I'm just going back over the past 15 minutes. Yeah. We started out with HR teams receiving less questions.
Yes.
About what should I be paid? Have I been paid right?
Yeah.
Employees who want to pick up more shifts are able to do so with an improved, let's say, employee experience, because they can just accept it on the phones. They know that they're being paid the right sort of overtime and that. And then for the people actually sort of staffing and creating the rosters, they've got some trend analysis. They've got the ability to request more labor quickly without, spending 45 minutes on the phone during the busiest time of the day. Yeah. Which is fantastic.
I was just thinking about, all of those things that people do, and how hard it is to, in the sales process or even the pre-sales process, how hard it can be to communicate all the time that they're spending, because you've sort of just gone through there and walked through the death of 1,000 cuts that an ops manager is going through.
Yes.
And for many of these people, that's not meant to be 100% of their time. It might not even be meant to be 50% of their time, and they could be out there, either seeing patients or serving clients and stuff like that. And so you combine that with the problems that we keep hearing about, people struggling for staff and staff shortage. Well, your manager is normally one of the most experienced, most senior people. So there's a double-edged sword here in that they're spending time away from where so you're going to need more resources to cover the time that the manager has taken away every time they have to go, oh, well, I do have to call this person in, or I do have to answer this call from a staff member who's worried about the wages they've been paid, or I do have to do that. So, it's stacking on the same problem.
Indeed. And Rod, are there any other features of Workforce that we haven't touched upon that you want to dive into?
Well, I do like talking about the onboarding tool, mainly because that's the thing that brought me over to the company, right? I go back to that background that I mentioned in finance, and we had this idea that there would be a way. Now, I knew from my history that there was so much bureaucracy and so many additional fees that didn't need to have to be paid on super funds. So there was in Australia, or pension funds as we would say in the UK, and there was the ability to access corporate funds at discounted rates if you had enough scale. And the idea that we came with was, well, what if we went and we were the person who provided that scale to any business, right? It doesn't matter if you've only got 20 employees or you've got 100 or 200, you don't have to do that. We will negotiate that, and any business will get that. And then the benefit to the employer was obviously we would then build the tech that would get rid of all the paperwork. And I can still remember our internal finance person being really skeptical that we could solve a problem. And then the first time they used it for us internally, he came over and said, that just happened. I would normally spend 45 minutes completing this form, putting it into this place, completing this form, putting it into Xero, completing this form, putting that into the clearinghouse, and it's all done. I'm like, I told you, it could be done. And again, at that time in Australia, there were only a handful of companies doing that, but the problem was solved. It didn't really matter. We eventually dropped, the side product side, the financial service license, because it was just the problem we were solving. In essence, was worth more to our clients than anything else. It stood on its own. I guess is what I'm trying to say, as its own feature. So that was a lot of fun to work through that, and it sort of gave me a stepping stone of the sorts of things that BAs are doing in tech companies, that product managers are doing in companies, and me having to go and do the sales process and selling to this to new customers, and selling. We weren't charging them for it. We were just trying to convince them to use it. This is something right. So a little bit of that sort of work got me a lot of exposure to our clients in the customer success world, because obviously if you're sending out a message to all the clients trying to get them to use the new feature, it's you that they come back to, and you're like, oh yeah, the new feature looks good, we'll turn that on. Also, can you have a look at this? So it was a really good, it was a great way to see the whole spread of what was going on behind the scenes with the product, as well as sales, customer success, all facets of things.
Fantastic. And, we've talked a lot about products that Workforce has built. If we go back a couple of weeks ago to the Christmas party that you hosted, you had a lot of sort of integration partners, who attended. So are you able to talk a little bit about that sort of ecosystem that you're building?
Yeah, well, to us, it's really important that we make that client journey as smooth as possible. And we're doing that by connecting with either payroll systems or, very importantly, demand systems, so that clients they don't have to worry about the fact that this information is held in different parts of their business. So if you take hospitality, we're not about to go build a POS company. There's got to be hundreds and hundreds of POS companies in this country. They don't need another POS company, and that's not what we do well. Mm-hmm. But the data that point of sale systems capture is really important in determining their labour demand.
Yes.
So our ability to be able to talk to those POS companies and get demand for hospitality is really important. In the care industry, it's care management systems.
Yes.
Like Nourish that are giving us, they're giving us data, and people don't have to enter employee data in multiple spots. So just having that synchronization, so you don't have to go to multiple spots. Again, we're saving those managers time. And at the payroll end, there's obviously certain payroll systems, but I think wage stream and live pay, financial wellbeing apps that are out there. And if you think about, again, in this country you get paid monthly, right?
Yeah.
So it can be a long wait, particularly for some of those people in those frontline jobs to get that next payment. So the ability, but they can't do the financial side of that unless they know that employee has actually worked the hours.
Indeed.
So being able to share that data directly with them, it becomes a staff benefit too for these people without changing their pay cycle. Yeah. They've given their employees access to these wages when they need them as they work.
Yes.
And let's tie that back into what we were talking about with the staff shortage and demand, right? So you've gone from having a staff shortage and you're an employee and you're trying to pick up shifts.
Yeah.
Not only can you go work that shift on a Friday night and make the hard call not to go out with your mates and spend £100, you can go earn money, and if you're integrated with another product, you can have that in your bank account, straight away. So that really motivates employees to pick up shifts when they know that they can actually have access to the money to do what they need to do to pay their bills, to pay their rent straight away, and they don't have to wait. Just shortening that cycle is really important.
Yeah.
So everywhere we go, we're coming up with other, there's lots of businesses out there doing really cool things, and we're looking at, okay, well, if it has anything to do with their workforce, can we work with them? Is there a way that we can value add by integrating and being closer together with those people?
Indeed. And look, I think that, the last example in particular that you gave about, say, wage stream is super beneficial during the cost of living crisis, because, people are pinched more than ever. A lot of I know 20% roughly of the economy work in shift jobs.
Yeah.
And then a fair proportion of them might be earning, lower wages.
Yep.
And so, that's where having those funds can really help positively impact them if they're living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
I think
it's a bit
great.
crazy that you've got on one side you've got people crying out for that additional income to make ends meet, and on the other side you've got some staff shortages. And if having products like this and integrations like this helps do a little bit to solve that problem, then I feel like we're doing a really good thing then.
Yeah, 100%. Rod, earlier on in the podcast, you mentioned that, you've had, actually, this might even have been in our chat beforehand. We talked about the fact that, you've got a wide range of different countries that you serve, but you haven't necessarily actively marketed in all of those countries. So are you able to talk to us a little bit about sort of, your international focus and any expansion plans you've got?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I did say that there's about 110, 120 countries where we've got paying subscribers, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we have a focus in all of those areas. And it's really important for us that if we're going to make an investment in a region, that we see some return on investment, but also that we make an impact and service those clients well.
Yeah.
And we've been lucky in the way that we've come to the UK and a few of the countries in Europe because clients have taken us there, right? Which is always easy. If you've got a client that says, I know the product will work in that country, I know it'll work in France, please take us there, then at least you've got a base to work from. But it's not always that easy or evident. And so for us, it's really important to have local people on the ground in the countries we're looking to expand to. And that's probably a bigger driver for us is finding the right people that know the market and we're confident in them building success. That's the most important thing for us in taking on a new market, because we could go chasing a number of different markets really quickly. But, if we were to launch in Spain, what we need is someone who really understands the Spanish market, because I could try and sell into Spain, but I'm not going to have as much success. I'm not going to know as well as I might know workforce management software or the hospitality industry or the care industry. I'm not going to understand what it's like selling directly into Spain. So finding those key first people, whether it be Spain or Italy or South Africa, wherever it is so important to getting started, because they will take us much further than we could have by just, rocking up in Barcelona and saying we're here.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. And I mean, culturally, I've done business in a few countries. I think, we met when I was living in Turkey,
Yes.
you were in London, and certainly the expectations and buying and selling cycles differ market by market, even in, from London to Manchester, there are some subtle differences.
Absolutely.
Relationship counts a lot more, I think, in the north than down here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we've experienced that everywhere we go. And I think that's, definitely, it's made it easier for me moving from Australia to the UK. But even though there are differences, the British, bless them, they're not too offended by having me sell to them, and they happy enough to anywhere where I'm too forthright and not not British enough, they're willing to overlook that. And I think the British probably better than they give themselves credit for in being in interacting, served with, sold to by a whole heap of different cultures. But understanding that there's also not as much of a difference for me to understand as there would be for me going to some other markets. And it's not even just the cultural things, it's understanding that market, what the wage structure is. Do they have penalty rates? What do they value? There's a whole heap of things that people with that local knowledge intrinsically get, and they're going to take us faster. So a really important thing in our business is payback period. So how quickly will it take us to get that money back that we've invested there? Yes. And I think that there's no question that some of these markets still would still love to make a bigger impact in, say, Germany, the biggest economy in Europe, but we want to go in with the right people. And in the short term, it might be more beneficial for us to go into Poland or the Netherlands because of, the particular people. It comes down to the particular people that we've got to help us launch in that market are actually really, really strong on the ground and going to be able to take us further. So it's an interesting thing to solve, but it's a really fun thing to try and solve as we grow, throughout Europe and Asia.
Indeed. And you mentioned payback period there. I think given
the finance term, I thought it'd get you.
No, I love it. And I'm going to interchange it now, with another term that I love, which is unit economics. Right now we're seeing it's just kind of free for all in the startup arena, bit of a bloodbath. everybody wants companies that have strong unit economics.
Yeah.
And so, it makes sense to be looking at those payback periods and, investing where you're going to get your money back quickly.
Yeah, we're different to a lot of, scale ups in that regard, in that we're still 100% founder owned. We've never taken any funding. So everything that, Tanda in Australia workforce throughout the world has built has come on customers' revenue. And that's a long held, belief of the founders, and it does instill a laser focus in the rest of the team in, wherever, not just we're investing new money for new countries, but wherever we're spending our time, there has to be a return for our customers, because we're entirely accountable to them. They're the only ones funding us at the moment. So we're focused on what they want, and that, the unit economics, to bring it back to your term, has to stack up, right? Because if it doesn't, then there's no salaries for us.
Indeed, yeah.
There's no pot of gold. There's no VC money at the other end to fill the gaps.
Yeah, it's very admirable, I think. Yeah,
it's unusual, and I still get, it's one of the things that lots of people find the most fascinating thing about our business in our size and our maturity. But the longer I've been here, the more I appreciate, the focus that gives us, and the autonomy that gives us to chase what we really believe in. And I think the benefit of it is you do have that strong focus on our company values and our customer needs.
Yes, yeah, fantastic. Rod, the past couple of years have been interesting ones. We've had the pandemic, and then, sort of cost of living crisis and just broader economic downturn. So I'm just wondering, whether there were any key trends you saw, either in the pandemic or in the downturn.
Yeah. So, I mean, immediately off the bat for us, the trend we noticed much was that our revenue was going down because people weren't employing people. People were being laid off. People didn't have their jobs anymore, particularly in that hourly workforce space. And as a bootstrap business, it was very hard to think about what we could do there. And obviously that's not a trend in itself, but what we had to do then is look for how our customers were using our software, or how we could pivot so that everyone was still getting value, so that people maintain their subscriptions as much as possible. Yes. And I think that looking internally, one of the first things we did is send out a piece of product information for all of our clients, saying these are the ways that we think we can help you deal with the pandemic in your business, whether it be switching to remote clock-ins to remove the contact of just clocking ins, or one of the ones that I think was most popular is we have a feature called time clock questions. So every time someone clocks on or off in a certain circumstance, we can get them to ask people a question. Now, originally, one of the main things that this was built for was we actually had a client where people had to have a blood alcohol level of 0. Right?
Okay,
and they were doing declarations. It could have been, I think it was mining services actually, and they were doing declarations, and they had this big, paper form, and everyone that signed in said, I declare that I am not under the evidence of alcohol. Well, that's a bit crazy. So we built this ability for them to be able to clock in, answer the question, and that would cover the declaration.
Yes.
And so very quickly people pivoted that. You think, first of all, you're clocking in on your own device, so you're not on the shared device anymore, but you're still answering the question. And the requirement there was to make the COVID health declaration.
Yes.
I declare that I've not been in contact with anyone with symptoms of COVID for however many days. So we were able to pivot a feature there that became really beneficial for those businesses that were still going.
Yes.
And there were other examples like that where we were going through our product trying to help them.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, we were looking at new ways, and we actually did briefly launch a product to help people track all of their customers as well, which people had to do for contact tracing.
Yep.
But in the biggest market we were at the time, Australia, the government went and did that and mandated their own app.
Yeah.
So no one ended up using that. And so there were other ways that we were looking to build functionality and help people. Mm-hmm. And all the while, I think the interesting thing we saw was that we talking about integration partners that we have to work with. A lot of our integration partners who were innovating along the way, or some of them even came to market in that time, and we saw this great tech adoption. So in certain industries where part of the sales process used to be trying to convince the person that they needed to use tech, that was sped up.
Indeed.
I think that table ordering was the obvious one. That was pushed on massively so that people didn't have to touch menus. People could stay at their table. There weren't people moving about the office, because remember, you had to stay in your seat.
Yes,
unless you were going to the bathroom or something like that. So it was like school, you had to ask for permission to go to the bathroom. So ordering partners and other technologies like that were coming to the market, and that makes our job easier, because our clients were getting more accustomed to the fact that they would have to use technology. And there's more integration partners out there with more data that they can send and help with their staffing patterns. So
indeed,
we obviously saw the natural shift in starting patterns. We were able to adjust that, but the more data sources we get into that, as we said earlier, the better, the more accurate we can be. So a lot of the things weren't necessarily, well, other than the obvious ones about staffing, we saw them, but it was interesting to watch the other technology come in and how that's helped the adoption of technology across the industries that we operate in, because people were forced to take the jump.
Yeah, indeed. It was a crazy time in terms of just technology adoption, and it sped things up. People talk about accelerator effects, and there was no faster accelerator than COVID.
Absolutely.
Rod, look, we've covered a lot today in terms of workforce, the solutions that you provide to your customers and the pain points that you're solving for them. My final question for you is about key takeaways that you'd like to share with the audience. And
I was dreading this last question of takeaways, because it does make it sound like I'm meant to be the font of all knowledge, which I definitely am not. But there are some things that there's plenty of things, on the other hand, that coming across into the SaaS world that I've really enjoyed. But I think the things that may have made our company successful, but also enjoyable to work at, is how much the ideas matter, and how much also the execution matters, and pushing things out. So the ability for everyone to ask questions and search for that answer and try things, and it is so important. And so one of our key values is talk to customers. But the way one of the senior guys said it when I first came along was that I haven't heard a question yet that our customers don't know the answer to. If we've got a serious problem here, just pick up the phone and ask 10 customers. Just start asking them, because they will have the answer. And that doesn't mean that you then go, they say build this and you build it exactly, but they will give you the insights into the problem that you're trying to solve.
Indeed.
And if you talk to a spread of those customers, how long does it really take you to pick up the phone and talk to 10 customers, and you'll get a fair cross section.
Indeed.
And the better you know your own customer base, the better you'll know the right customers to pick up the phone and talk to. And that's really where the answers are for any growth, for any product solutions, for any problems that we're coming up with. And I think the other big takeaway, other than the value of really understanding your customers, is just that the answer could be anywhere. I like to think that Alex, our tech founder, is pretty smart, but he continually tells us that the smartest thing he does is surround himself by people smarter than him. And I think that's an old business adage that people do, like continually surround. But I think we've done that pretty well. But it also doesn't help you unless you're wise enough or calm enough to listen to everyone and take those good ideas, because like you can't do every idea, but there's lots of good ideas just in the people that we hire, and we like to think that we attract that by having that sort of environment where I think it's sort of been refreshing working in this environment, but just knowing that always being open-minded to the new people coming into the business, the young people coming into your business, and what they have to say, the old people coming into your business too, when you're recruiting, the more senior heads, and there's so much knowledge. I enjoy chatting with our chairman, John Puddock, so much, because he's been coding since, he'll tell us. If you ask him, he'll tell you he's been coding since computers were that wide.
Far out.
They small little screens with green writing and nothing else. And the experience and the wisdom that he's got, in his head, I just enjoy talking to him, because I always learn something.
Yes.
And that's probably why some of the people are listening to this podcast. If they've hopefully they've learned, they've had some takeaway. But you've just got to keep listening, and particularly to the people that think the same way about business that we do, about how important the customer solution is. So that's honestly, they're the things that I think have served our company well, that have served me hopefully pretty well. This way, I'm still trying to work and do them as best I can all the time, and that's what I think helps keep our focus.
Fantastic. Look, Rod, excellent podcast and fantastic takeaways at the end there. And, we'll have to have you back to hear how Workforce gets on over the next couple of years.
I would love it. I would love to come back and say, after that podcast, I got contacted by someone in Spain who really wanted to, take on the workforce management scene in Spain or something like that. It's truly been one of the great things as we've taken the business global, is working with so many different countries along the way. So in all seriousness, I'm really looking forward to taking the software to new countries and new markets as we go forward.
Excellent. Rod, thank you so much for your time today, mate. And
cheers, Lucas.
We look forward to following that journey.
Thank you very much.
Most welcome.